Hello and welcome to a very special How I Paint Things. Now today what I've got whizzing around in front of me are a couple of Steel Legion troopers. These fellas, they are prints and they've been scaled up from 15mm scale files, so there are one or two details which are a little lacking compared to what you would get from the official metal miniatures, but I can actually get these and print these, so yeah, we're going to practice on these fellas here. So, keeping it nice and simple, let's get straight into the painting. All of the paints will be listed in the description below. Let's get started. So, because we are going to be working with predominantly quite warm colours, what I've used here as the primer is Wraithbone. You could use a white, because we're going to be using yellows and such like that, I would advise against something like Grey Sear by contrast, no pun intended. Wraithbone or something like Brain Matter Beige from the Army Painter will work perfectly well here. So we are going to start where we're most likely to make a mess, and that's going to be true of most of these colors. I have here Gilliman Flesh, and big surprise, we're going to go over what little we can see of his skin here. So as carefully as you can, into the face mask. And I'd recommend, what I'm using here is actually one of the hobby base coating brushes from the Army Painter. I quite like for this using a synthetic brush, which stays quite stiff. And whether your guys are wearing their masks or not, don't forget their little ears. Now for his role here, his trousers and his helmet, I'm going to use Occultist Cloak from the Army Painter. You could use Basilicanum Grey here if you prefer, but I like that it's got a darker finish than Basilicanum Grey, I would say. So that's what I'm looking forward to using. I'm going to go over these as carefully as I can. But again, we're doing them now because, especially on his trousers, we're likely to make a bit of a mess. Now for things like his respirator mask, his straps and his webbing, all his pouches and what have you, this is Satchel Brown from the Army Painter. I need a little bit more on my brush. Now you can do his gloves and boots in this same color at the same time. And indeed, I think that's how you'll see most folks will paint them. But I just want you to be able to see a couple of different options. Now this time, while painting the larger areas of the gloves and boots, what I'm going to use is a medium layer brush instead, because I want it to be able to spread from the tip just a little bit more. So Cygor Brown this time. Like I mentioned, you could use this for everything, all of the leather. You'll see it's a little bit darker and a little bit more red than Satchel Brown rather. Now, can you see the difference there? The Cygor Brown is quite a bit darker. I do like having it in my little toolbox because that warmth really does help for some things. Personally, on these guys, I think I would prefer the Satchel Brown, but that's much of a much. That is for you to decide, and that's half the reason why I've used two colors. What I'm going to turn to now is some Black Templar, and I'm going back to my pointy little brush for this. I'm only going to do the rim of his mask here as carefully as I can with this Black Templar. If possible, I want to try and aim my brush so if I kind of make a mistake, I end up splurging over the black helmet rather than the stuff in the center. But we have got a tidy up stage coming for that anyway, so try not to let yourself get too hung up on this being perfect. Now, there's a bit of a mess going on there in the goggles, but I'm not too concerned. Once you finish with those, swap back to your layer brush, and still with Black Templar, we're going to fill in the black details. Now here you might choose to go for something like Black Legion, which will cover better, but I like the little bit of blue that Black Templar has in it by contrast, so it's up to you, again, what you use. Now once that has had plenty of time to dry, I'm actually going to give my Black Templar another really good shake and go over the gun casing a second time. Again, you could probably just use a normal acrylic or Black Legion here if you want to stick to contrast style paints, but the little hint of blue in Black Templar, it is part of what I'm looking for. Now I actually am going to turn here to Basilicanum Grey, and we're going to pop this over any of the hoses that are visible. I think you'll see straight away what a considerable difference there is between this and that Occultist Cloak we used earlier. Now we can get on to those little odd bits of tidy up that we might need to do. So starting on his back here, I'm going to straighten up these crossbells. Just a little bit of wraithbone from the pot for this. Take your time with it, and you may find in some areas that you need to come back and give it a second coat. But for the most part, I think I've been pretty lucky with this guy. Now at last we come to the fun part. So make sure you give your Agorist dunes a really good shake. Load up your layer brush. And then it pays to work in sections with contrast. So I'm going to start here on his back and slowly work my way around, keeping my brush moving in the same direction as much as I can. So little bits under here you see I haven't bothered tidying up because it's not going to matter too much if they're a little bit splurged. But yeah, don't just slop it on and then run away from it. Pop it on and then give it a couple of seconds to settle. And while it's still wet, you can shift it around with your brush so that it looks a bit more reasonable, especially on flatter areas. So I'm going to go around now, fill in the entire thing. For some of the areas up around the chest and the respirators and what have you that are a little bit more difficult to reach with a brush this size, I will swap down to that little pointy synthetic brush I've been using and fill those bits in with that instead. Actually, let's push my luck a little bit. I'm going to load up my brush here with a bit of Agorist dunes, flip them around so I can reach a little easier, and I'm going to paint in that section with this brush. You'll see part of the bonus to having done the darker colors first is if I get a bit of this on the browns and what have you, you're barely going to see it. Now, isn't that magic? I love Agorist dunes. There's actually a Citadel guide which recommends using this for the Cadians, and I think it's a little, I don't know. It doesn't look like that right color to me, but for these guys, just perfect. Now I'm tipping them sideways because what I have is magic blue, which is a light blue from the army painter. I'm going to start on one side of his goggles and then drag my brush towards the other side. Then what you can do is actually add just a tiny bit of water and concentrate, add a little bit more into the bottom half of the goggles. Now I know some folks prefer that it be the color of the helmet behind, and you can do that, but I think a little splash of blue really helps lighten these guys up. While that dries, just a couple of days ago I was singing the praises of military shade from the army painter. This is where we're going to get that greenish tint to the helmet. So straight over the top here with some military shade. While that's drying, you'll see it is quite subtle, but then the helmet's never looked all that green to me anyway, so matter of personal preference there. If you wanted to do that a bit quicker, you could instead swap out for Lancer Grey from the Vallejo Express line. That would probably work quite well. What I've got now is Lead Belcher, and funnily enough, all the metallic bits are going to get their base coat now. And then once those have dried, it's time to hit them with shade. Now I'm using here, this is Dark Tone from the Army Painter, but Nuln Oil can also do the job. It is up to what you like, what you can get your hands on, all that sort of thing. So over all of the metallic and the black stuff. And there we have it. You could easily varnish them up now, call them done. That is perfectly suitable to pop on the table. With his base on him, he's going to look fantastic. What I am going to do though, giving the game away slightly, you already saw this at the start of the video, but what I am going to do is a few highlights on this chap. The colors that I'm going to use for these I will list in the description rather than do every single one individually on screen, because it's just a little bit of water mixed into your paint to make sure that it flows off the brush, same as usual. So I'm going to highlight this guy nice and quick, and with those listed in the description, you'll be able to see still how I got the results. So once their bases are on them and they are all varnished up, let's get a look at these two Steel Legionnaires once they're all finished. And so there we have it, our Steel Legion are complete. Now I did go in with a little bit of black, completely black in the eye socket of the standing fella, a thin line of white and then a little vertical line of black to do his eyes. There aren't many fellas who have their masks up, so I don't think it's a huge amount of extra work to do the eyes on them. I think it would look cool. I also recommend that if you do highlight anything, the little bit of extra work to do the coats, it does look cool. That's one step that I would definitely want to include in my own. So I'm dead happy with that. And I also had fun using the Color Forge matte spray for the first time. That happened to arrive by delivery just as I was going outside to varnish these dudes. Gave it a shot and it's turned out really well, so dead happy with that. So hopefully something there was interesting to you. There might be one or two things that spur your imagination. I would recommend, personally in the future, I would use the Satchel Brown for all of the leather details. Having gone back and highlighted the Cygor Brown, I think the Satchel Brown, it just suits me more. I like how it looks. As well, if you did want that more field grey finish to the helmets, rather than the way I have done them here, what I'd probably recommend is go score some of the Lanza Grey from Vallejo Express, or mix up, say, Krieg Camo and Basilicanum Grey, give a couple of coats of that. It's up to you. I think you could probably be a little bit more green. I've never seen them as being massively green, so I didn't really push that all that far. Anyhow, you can try that if you like. So as always, thank you very much to Exit23 Games for the light and sound equipment, as well as all of my wonderful patrons who are keeping me ticking in paints and glue, including my gorgeous producers who are showing up on screen now. Thank you so much for your support, folks. Really mean it. Now, any questions or anything, feel free to get in touch. Pop a comment in the old box below, or my Twitter and Instagram are both linked there too. So thank you very much for your time, one and all, and you all enjoy the rest of your day.